Rounding to significant figures with Tutor. Here are the beginner questions, some of the easiest questions that you're likely to find on this topic. Firstly, we're rounding 925,478. Significant figures are your first important digits, and by important we mean those with a value larger than 0. So my first significant figure in this number would be the 9. We put our rounding line after the first significant figure, and looking at the next number, we decide whether it's 5 or more. In this case we have a 2, which is not 5 or more, so we need to round this number down. So the number before the rounding line will stay the same when rounding down, and everything after the line will change to 0, leaving me with my final answer of 900,000. Next, we're rounding 0.0424 to two significant figures. My important digit greater than 0 is this one, which means my second significant figure must be the 2. So I put my rounding line after this, and looking at the next number to decide whether it's 5 or more. In this case it's not, so everything else and the number before the rounding line will stay the same, and after the rounding line will change to zeros. So my final answer is 0.042. Lastly, we're rounding 13.68543 to three significant figures. This is my first significant figure, my second, so this one here would be my third. My rounding line afterwards, and looking at the next number to decide whether it's 5 or more. In this case we have 8, which is 5 or more, so this number needs to be rounded up by adding 1 to the number before the rounding line to give me 7, and everything after the rounding line will still change to a 0, meaning my final answer will be 13.7. On to the intermediate questions with a slight increase in difficulty. We're rounding 0.00417 to one significant figure. My first important digit is the 4, so putting my rounding line afterwards and looking to see whether the next number is 5 or more, which it's not, so I'll need to round down by keeping the 4 the same and everything afterwards changing to zeros. My answer is 0.004. Next, we're rounding 0.0509 to two significant figures. The 5 is my first significant figure, and zeros at the beginning of the number are not counted as significant figures, but when you have a 0 in between other significant figures, then that does become significant. So my second significant figure is this 0 in between the 5 and 9. So looking at the next number and deciding whether it's 5 or more, which in this case it is, so we'll round this number up by changing the number before the rounding line to a 1, and everything after the line change to 0, leaving us with our answer of 0.051. Lastly, we're rounding 13.999 to three significant figures. My first significant figure is the 1, the second is 3, and my third significant figure is this 9. Put my rounding line after the 9 and decide whether the next number is 5 or more. So I need to add 1 to the 9 before the rounding line, which will change this to a 10, meaning I need to carry 1 over into the next column, and everything after the line will change to zeros. So my final answer can be written as 14.0 or 14. On to the advanced question, one of the trickiest questions that you're likely to find on this topic. The speed of sound is 1,200 km per hour when rounded to two significant figures. What is the maximum speed it could be, and what's the minimum speed it could be? If 1,200 was rounded to two significant figures, that means my rounding line would need to go after the second significant figure in this number, which is 2. My minimum value or speed would have needed to be rounded up to give me 1,200. Rounding up involves adding 1 to the number before the rounding line. So taking away 1 from 2 would give me 1. And we normally look at the number after the rounding line to see whether it's 5 or more, and 5 being the smallest value that would cause you to round up. So therefore my minimum value is 1,150 kilometers per hour. The maximum value rounded to give me 1,200 must have been rounded down. When rounding down, the number before the rounding line stays the same, so 2, and the number after the rounding line would need to be the largest number that wasn't 5 or more, so 4, and I want to use all of the largest digits possible for the remaining placeholders, so 9 for the next one. Now there's nothing in the question that tells us that this has to be a whole number, so I could continue and say 0.999, and you get the idea. This would continue for infinity, which is the same as 1249.9 recurring, and recurring means it continues forever, and we can represent this by putting a dot above the number that recurs or repeats. There's a crossover here with another GCSE topic of upper and lower bounds, where you are allowed to represent this number as 1250, as they are infinitely close to each other. They are virtually the same number, but just focusing on the context of this question, we can leave our answer as 1249.9 recurring kilometers per hour. Here's some questions that I've completed. It appears as though I've made some mistakes. See if you can pause the video and tell me what they are, or write some corrections in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you found that video useful, don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment. If you're struggling with topics or finding maths difficult, subscribe and turn on notifications to receive regular updates about new video tutorials and other useful content. You can visit and follow all of my socials by clicking the links in the description below.